Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's presentation on foreign military sales, left of letter of request. My name is Oscar Magaña, an international trade specialist with the U.S. Commercial Service based in San Antonio, Texas. Before we begin, and as participants continue logging on, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. You are on listen-only mode. You may type your questions in the Q&A box at any time during the presentation, and we will hold them for the question and answer session at the end. This webinar is also being recorded. If you object, please disconnect. Now, for any of you who may not be familiar with our organization, I would like to first share some quick background information about the U.S. Commercial Service. The U.S. Commercial Service is the trade promotion arm of the U.S. Department of Commerce International Trade Administration. We are located throughout the United States, as well as U.S. embassies and consulates in nearly 80 countries. Our global network of trade professionals helps U.S. businesses to explore markets around the world and connect with pre-screened, qualified potential business partners. Whether you're looking to make your first export sale or expand to additional international markets, we offer the trade counseling, market research, business matchmaking, and commercial diplomacy you need in order to connect with lucrative business opportunities around the world. Now, let's begin. I would like to introduce Brian Beams to provide welcoming remarks. Brian is a senior international trade specialist from the Newark, New Jersey office. Brian is responsible for the aerospace and defense, automotive, energy, environmental technology, financial services, information and communication technology, and digital economy, safety and security. Brian is also the founder and team leader for the SCO Global team within the U.S. Commercial Service. Brian, you may begin.
Thanks, Oscar, and welcome everybody to Export Week. This is the second session of 18 sessions that will take place this week. We appreciate everybody's participation, and in the link or in the chat box, I'll put the link on if for those who do not know of the other events that are taking place this week. And there's actually on the page you'll find more sessions that will be taking place this month that will either be commercial service led or co-led. More on that. But I'd like to take a moment on to the veteran-owned businesses that are connected to this session. We have an initiative, it's called SCO Global. It's simply to inform and educate veteran-owned businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned businesses, military spouse businesses, and veteran-led businesses on all things related to either tradecraft or opportunities. We are having an upcoming session. It's a 3-component session of an export education program where the first part is to really get your company export ready. The second will drill down on the 5 pillars of exporting, and then the last component it'll be you'll be engaged with the likes of XM, SBA, and a lot of our veteran associations that we're beginning to partner with. So therefore you're aware of what not only federal government resources are there, but also private resources that are supporting the veteran-owned community. I just want to appreciate or thank everybody for participating. Oscar, back to you, sir.
Thank you, Brian, for that introduction. Now, I would like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. John Smilik, co-founder and president of Fairchild Fitzgerald LLC. John brings almost 40 years of U.S. government knowledge and experience into building and delivering the highest quality consulting and education on security cooperation for U.S. defense industry, international partners, and U.S. government clients. Most recently, he completed 15-year tenure as an associate professor for Security Cooperation Management and was the Defense Institute of Security Assistant Management, DISM, for its functional manager for technology transfer and course manager of the CONUS and industry courses. John was a master navigator in the United States Air Force prior to his retirement as a lieutenant colonel. His flight and staff background in operational test and research led him to the acquisition career field where he achieved level 3 program management professional certification and was the chief of International Armaments Cooperation Office at Wright Laboratories. John, you may begin.
For having me here as a retired, as you know, Lieutenant Colonel retired military officer from the Air Force and a disabled vet. I do appreciate all the help that they're giving to the other companies out there like mine, that we are a disabled veteran-owned company ourselves. So hats off to them to begin with. So thank you again for that great introduction, and welcome everyone here. My name is John Smilek, and how I'm going to present both today, and I've got another presentation that hopefully you can be for on Wednesday. I'm going to do a very high wave top level on security cooperation. I will define that soon. And a subset of that is both foreign military sales, direct commercial sales, and other programs. But those are the huge two big programs that most of you should be interested in and are. The other thing I'm going to do, since there's a myriad of different companies in here and different people in different companies, big, small, intermediate size, I'm going to talk to you like you're in business development, like you're a BD person. And so that's what this is all about. This is, as it was just mentioned by the other gentleman, this is all about helping you grow your business and that kind of thing. So that's the way we're going to approach it. So Oscar, if you can go to the first slide, we'll get started on this. Thank you. Again, go to the next. Stay here for. Go back for a second. Yeah, I'm sorry. This one is going to be letter of offer. This is going to be left of letter of request. That's what LOR stands for. The letter of request is the document that the foreign person or partner nation, some person in authority, is going to present to someone in authority in the United States government. I will cover that in a few minutes. To say we are interested, we are asking to buy some items from you, the United States government, through the foreign military sales program. That's what the letter of request is. And today's period is going to be left of LORs, meaning what is done to prep the country to help them get the most actionable, and that's a key word, actionable letter of request to the U.S. government, because the more actionable it is, meaning more information that's in there, and as clear as the foreign partner nation can be as to what they want to acquire, what they want to purchase and buy, it makes it easier for the U.S. government to then purchase that for them. And you, my friends out there in industry, can help countries do this. That's the catch at the end of this lesson I'll talk to you about. So let's get started and see how we can get to letter of request and how you can help the countries get an actionable LOR. Next slide, please. First thing we're going to start with very quickly, again, wave top level, we're going to define and help you understand when we hear the words security assistance and security cooperation. Next slide. This is a bit of maybe a little bit of dark humor, but the circle of life, wheel of death is what we're trying to say in FFG with this slide, is that it is part of the United States government. And so many of you have already worked with the U.S. government or been a member of the U.S. government, and you know things do get done, but not always in the most swift manner. So the circle of life is, if you want to participate and hopefully grow your business through foreign military sales, direct commercial sales, you got to go, that's life of getting it. And that's what you see there is not only the legislation branch, but the executive branch, and under the executive branch, Commerce Department, State Department, Department of Defense. And these different entities can take quite a while sometimes for the wheels and the gears to turn, and that can feel like the wheel of death. So let's go ahead, next slide, start talking about these more specifically. Under the executive branch of government, the president, there are then the different departments. And as you see, these gears here represent the primary departments under the executive branch that have some role in security cooperation, FMS and DCS. Even a subset of that, the three key that we're going to talk about are going to be commerce, you see in the middle, state, and DOD, and even more so when it comes to foreign military sales. You're going to find out the absolute two key gears in here are State Department and Department of Defense. And let's explain that by going to the next slide. Here you see U.S. Organizations for Export of military items, foreign military items. This is one of, like I would say, probably about a half a dozen specifically of the slides I'm going to show you today. You're going to be able to receive all of them, but this is one of them that if you're new to this, I think that this is a fairly simple organization chart with a ton of key information on it for as little as here. So let me go very quickly and help you understand what I'm showing you here. There has to be an authority to do whatever you want to do within the government, and that's where you get laws passed by the legislation signed by the executive branch. In this case, when it comes to exports, not only the organizations, but what you see above them are the two key acts of Congress that give the authority for the exports of FMS and other dual use items, meaning dual military and civilian use. Let's start on the right side with Commerce Department. You've got the law there, and it's relatively new. It's only been around for 2 or 3 years. There was other laws before, but now we have the Export Control Reform Act, to reform just that, the Export Control Reform Act for Commerce Department. Under Commerce Department, they have the Bureau of Industry and Security, which is the key office when it comes to these exports. The Commerce Department then has the ear or a regulation, as you can see there, that implements or promulgates, is a legal term for puts into action the law. And items that are military, have a military utility, many of them are, or most of them are on the Commerce Control list and are controlled by Commerce Department as to what countries or what organizations may receive these and get licenses to receive these items. Flip over to the other side, where we're really going to spend most of the time over the next half hour or so. It's going to be on the State Department. You can see the parallels. They have the Arms Export Control Act, which I'll cover in more detail here in a few minutes, first signed in 1976 and is still active and has been modified many times. That's I want to stop for a second to say that both these laws give the authority to the president, and then by the Arms Export Control Act, the president by executive order assigned to the State Department the day-to-day administration and authority to make the decisions for the export of military items. And so it's by the executive order been delegated to the Department of State. Okay, and then specifically in Department of State, there's a couple of layers between this. I'm trying to keep this chart simple. Directorate of Defense Trade Controls, even has the word defense on it. This is part of the State Department. They, in turn, what many of you can recognize, and I'll go into a little more depth for those of you that are novices or new to this, is the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, the ITAR, which again promulgates or puts into action the Arms Export Control Act. And I'll show you later how it's broken up into different parts. And then Part 121 of the ITAR has the United States munitions list. And just as it sounds, whatever you are selling or training that you have or whatever, it's going to fall under one of these generally large lists that are listed in Part 121 of the ITAR on the USML, is what I'll call it from now on. In the middle, look at the authority that the Department of Defense has when it comes to the export. I'll wait. I don't have time to wait very long to see they have no formal authority. This is one of the first things where I'm knocking on the table. The Department of Defense does not have the authority for the exports of military items. When it comes to FMS, it's the State Department by the ITAR that, by the Arms Export Control Act and put into action by the regulation that has this authority. And I'll explain how this stance works in a minute. I'm just showing you, as we call, who's who in the zoo and under the authority who has what. Under the Department of Defense, I have the 3 purple blocks down there. That's strictly to show you that on the right side, Undersecretary for Intelligence, they're the ones that are going to help and to keep your intellectual property rights and the security items of the U.S. intact and make sure that things are being done in a secure way. So they're involved very much under the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense does not manufacture or do anything. They go out to you, industry, to acquire that. So acquisition and sustainment is very involved in foreign military sales. It combines some of that already exist for purchasing items for the Department of Defense with some caveats that they use to purchase the items for other countries. So they're important. The reason I put Undersecretary of Defense in the middle is because even though the authority is rests with State Department for foreign military sales and exports, inside the Department of Defense, there is an agency that is the 500-pound canary, or gorilla, maybe I should say, when it comes to defense security cooperation. And that is, next slide, please. My slides are, hopefully the slides, Oscar, there, thank you, is the Defense Security Cooperation Agency. It says it all. The agency within the defense that's responsible for the administration of security cooperation is Defense Security Cooperation Agency. And you can see a litany of different bullets on here, oversees execution of this for the State Department. So the State Department says, and I'll show you this in a couple slides. The State Department says we have the authority, but we are not DOD. We don't acquire Department of Defense items. That's got to be done in DOD. So you have this agency totally dedicated to security cooperation. That is the reason for their existence. They coordinate security cooperation programs with the other Undersecretary, again, as it shows, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. The implementation of security cooperation programs throughout all these different partner nations and NATO and that, and internally within the implementing agencies within the department. Well, not always within the Department of Defense. There's 11 implementing agencies that can implement this letter of offer and acceptance, which is actually the contractual vehicle we'll talk about on Wednesday of how the U.S. government sells to foreign governments. There's 11 different implementing agencies, but 93 to 95% of the letters of offer and acceptance are going to be handled and managed by the 3 services. So there's large entities within the services that work very closely with DSCA. Now, as I said, we don't have a regulation here because we don't have an authority within the Department of Defense, but we do have a manual. It used to be called the SAM. Now, about 15 years ago, they changed it to the ESAM, meaning electronic. It's no longer in paper form. But this is the policies. You see the last couple sub-bullets there. The SAM, as everybody calls it, is a reference and follows the authority of the Arms Export Control Act. And as you can see the slide before that, and other authorities, which I will show you a few of them later on, but it is a manual. It's the policy of how everyone is going to, within the U.S. government, is going to work to get this letter of offer and acceptance and the items sold that's in this SAM. There's another star slide that you've got to be able to understand how to get in the SAM, and I'll show you here in a minute how to do that. This is your key document, and they in turn will reference a lot of the other documents I'm talking about. Next slide. Back to them now. Let's go back now that we've got that down for the Security Assistance Management Manual. I'm going to go through very, very quickly in just a minute or two. Again, the Arms Export Control Act, the legal basis. The other purple I want to show you are a couple things. Number one, I know not all of you are manufacturing companies out there. Some of you are training and have services that you want to provide. The Arms Export Control Act, I just want you to see that they cover both the articles and services. Also, I've been in my specifically, it would be 20 years in August that I first started working for DISAM, which is now Defense Security Cooperation University, which is the schoolhouse that trains everybody in the government on this, where I worked for 15 years. While I was working there teaching as a professor, a few times it was brought up, well, I heard companies will say that, well, we're just going to go direct commercial sales, and we don't have to be affected by the Arms Export Control Act. I just want to put that to rest. Is no, right in the AECA, it says, covers commercial, read that as direct commercial sales, and government, read that as foreign military sales programs. Both are covered, and as I said before, the regulation and the munitions list is there. So let's go to the next slide, start talking about the ITAR, again, just for one slide. This is the, again, the ITAR. A couple things just to let you know about this. It provides the registration and licensing. If you are listening to me right now, and if you are at all interested in doing this, you probably, not probably, if you're going to do anything in foreign military sales or direct commercial sales, either manufacture the item or try to sell the items, you need to be registered with the State Department, and that's in one of the parts of the ITAR. But what I want to key on right now is what's in there. The United States Munitions List, that I'll call the USML from now on, has 21 large categories. 3 of them almost should read Army, Navy, Air Force, and there's others for chemical and biological. There's other ones for sensors and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of categories there, and they're part 121 of the ITAR. As you can't see it real well, but it's a little fuzzy on the screen, but the picture, that's actually a hard copy of an ITAR that you can get, and it's got part 120 through 130 is of the regulation, and part 121, where the subparts, is the United States Munition List and the 21 categories. Briefly, too, I've got SME in there. SME is defined as significant military equipment by State Department. And then you can see the text of what it says it can do there. But I have a great friend of mine who just talked to me this morning, that I used to be another professor, and he goes, the way I tell it is, the significant military equipment is stuff that goes boom or precipitates the booming. In other words, the stuff that really is the weapons and that kind of thing. And the one, if there was a motto in security cooperation, it would be, it depends. because there's so many different things that depend on, well, what country you're talking to, how is this being financed, where are we in the program. But one of the few things that's black and white is significant military equipment, because in the ITAR on the list, it defines what SME is. If the State Department does not have an asterisk in the category, in the subcategory areas, in the in the ITAR, in the United States munitions list, then it's not SME. And if it is SME, there are special contacting Congress or special things, hoops you have to go through. I just want you to understand, well, what the heck is SME? Go to the ITAR part 121 and it'll define it black and white for you, because if your stuff falls within the subcategories that have an asterisk, then it is SME, black and white. Next slide, please. Quick on authorities. What we're going to talk about in the government, those of you that have been in the government, the legislation branch will first usually have a law for authority. Give authority, and let's just keep using Department of Defense, that's my whole world. Give the authority of the DoD, here's your jobs you're going to do, your general authorizations from Congress and to the executive branch. Here's the authorities you've got from Congress to do your job. Then appropriations are usually a different law, because Congress likes to keep the money in their own pocket as long as they can. But the appropriation authority by law is just that, appropriating the money for doing whatever you want to do. And there are some grant aid money in the billions of dollars area. So that should have your attention, that is appropriated money through the US government. So I want you to understand that the DoD has been given authority and then appropriations to use the money that is from Congress. So it's not always the other country's money. Sometimes it is the US government's grant aid money, and you need to be aware of that. That's why I've got this slide down there, and you can see in the orange, you can't do one without the other or you won't make it anywhere. So next slide. Okay, the authorities, now that I've mentioned the authorities, let's talk about authorities for military sales. Congress, again, recognizes that foreign governments, partner nations, allies, whatever you want to call them, have a need for their self-protection. So by law, the Arms Export Control Act, Section 4, they said to our countries friendly to us, we are authorizing in this law to the executive branch, to State Department, to sell items to this country if they so wish to purchase the items for their own security, self-defense. Notice it doesn't say offensive purposes, for their own self-defense, and also to stop the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Because if countries feel, countries are like people, and if they feel insecure, they want to protect themselves. And if they don't have conventional arms, then they might go to biological, chemical, and with very, very few, but a couple to nuclear. So we don't want that. So let them have the protection they need to a limit that we will, again, agree to. So, and it's by region and arrangement between the United Nations that we could be working with these countries as well, and they could come to our assistance, especially our allies, and enable military, foreign military to contribute to public works and activities. It could be flood damage, hurricanes, whatever, and they can use these, let's say, deuce-and-a-half trucks that they bought for the DoD to help their civilians, not to attack their civilians or do anything wrong. They could get sanctioned by the U.S. government if they use these military items that they've been purchased from us the wrong way. But self-defense, helping us in the allies, or helping your public works. That's why the Congress says the U.S. government will, case by case, sell items to other countries. Next slide, please. Another one, put a big star on this one, people. I know there's a lot of lines on the screen, and I meant it this way because if you, I would suggest you actually go and get this document, this document that was signed by President Trump in his time about 3 years ago. Conventional arms transfer, because we said not the weapons of mass destruction, conventional arms transfer is what FMS and DCS is all about. The reason this is so important is it was rather vague in the two documents that I knew that were the conventional arms transfer. One was Clinton and one was Obama, that had signed different ones. But under the Trump administration, and I'm not trying to be political here, it's just what happened. We know the Trump administration was very pro-business, and the words you see in purple were not quite as strong under the previous conventional arms transfer policy. And this is so new that there's even people in the field that I'm going to talk to you later on about that you need to go for help that may not even be aware of this change to conventional arms transfer. It just happened. So I want you to be aware, you to be educated that this new conventional arm transfer, again, it didn't change much, but protection of U.S. transferred military items, protection of it, not having third-party transfer without the U.S. government's permission, that kind of thing is very important. But increase trade opportunities for U.S. companies, appropriate advocacy and trade promotion activities. Well, we're here with Commerce Department right now. That's why they're helping you, and that's why they're coming up with these new programs for you, I believe. But I do know under State and Department and DOD and the people that are in the embassies that I'm going to tell you to go talk to, they were a little shy about talking too much to industry and being afraid that they might step a little outside the boundary of what they can help with. This said, pretty much the executive branch said, everybody over there at the Pentagon, the people from industry come over and they want to sell FMS DCS, help them. Increase that opportunity, strengthen the manufacturer of defense industry base is helping as well. We want to make you, everything you all do stronger, bigger, healthier, and through sales of security cooperation efforts. So in this document from 3 years ago, it's made even more powerful. Go sell. So wanted you to be aware of this. Next slide, please. I would like to reverse this in the next slide, but this one's got all the acronyms spelled out. Both these slides are going to be yin and yang together. But let me do this one first to show you all the words spelled out. You'll see the next slides, the Venn diagram. It just didn't fit. So major security assistance programs, when it's under State Department, you see DOS for State Department on the right side. As I said, security assistance programs are under the authority of State Department. That's the authority. But the ones on the right are administered by Department of State, and that includes direct commercial sales, because we're doing the yin and yang also of DCS and FMS. So DCS is all I'm really going to talk about on this slide, and FMS on this slide. Commercial authority for and management, direct commercial sales, Department of State. Not the authority, but management of the foreign military sales. And I will talk briefly about foreign military financing under the DoD. Next slide, and let me show you a little bit more of how this looks on a great Venn diagram that really combines all these. So there you go, see all the acronyms. So as you see, whenever you see 22, that's U.S. code, meaning the law was passed to say, like the Arms Export Control Act, that this is under the authority of State Department. You got direct commercial sales, and you saw the other acronyms on the other page there, Economic Support Fund and other things. And on the left side that we didn't show on the previous slide, and we're really not going to talk much about, are the things that are DoD not authorized and administered. But the key one that I'm talking about for the rest of this half hour or so is the foreign military sales, and that is State Department authority, administered or managed by DoD. So let's keep that in mind as we keep going. Next slide. Security assistance. Again, this is just the definition of it. I got more important things I want you to understand, but I want to give you this definition. Department of State authorized. I kind of covered this. Next slide. Security cooperation. I bring this up again. DoD pretty much uses the word security cooperation more times instead of security assistance. So I just wanted you to get the definition of both of these things, but most people are going to know what you're talking about, whether they say security assistance, security cooperation, but they do have slightly definitions, and you can see them in the DoD directive in there. Next slide. I just wanted you to have that in your hat. I also just wanted you to have this in here as a one slide where you could go to these half a dozen regulations in here. The first 4 I've already shown you on a slide and talked to you about. Again, the top one, very important. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the SAM. And then also I want to bring out that since we are acquiring things for the foreign government, I'll talk more about this on Wednesday, the Federal Acquisition Regulation and the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, which have the authority of law, come into play when how we are going to acquire items through the acquisition system of the DoD for foreign partners. These regulations are come into play as well. So these are important ones that you really need to laundry list for. That's why I put these in here. Next slide. This is the SAM, electronic SAM only. As I said before, the Defense Security Cooperation Agency under the Undersecretary for Policy is the big gorilla that runs this whole thing. if you want to get into this, if you decide you're already in or you want to get into the whole world of foreign military sales, you must get this as a favorite on your computer. A couple things as you can see here, you can drop down and it has the chapters in there and you can read the different chapters and they'll have sub chapters. So if you're looking for finances in one chapter, and I did the tech transfer as you heard in my bio, that was chapter 7 in the textbook I had, but it's chapter 3 in here. I know chapter 3 of this SAM very, very well. The other thing I want you to see is about 3 more slightly above where it says chapters. If you can look into the orange there a little bit, 3 over policy memos. Do not just glance over that. Policy memos are just what they sound like. They are the DSCA current policy memos. Not a bad idea to jump in there, drop them down, and see if there's things that are interesting to you that's going on changing the policy for FMS. You can stay current by just understanding. You can go to this website for the SAM and going over that policy memo and looking at that. And sometimes they're just changing a code or something, and other times there's some really juicy information in there that's being put out in the public, and I want you to know where to go find it. Next slide. Now let's really get into the FMS and DCS and a little contrast. Please, next slide. FMS, as it is, the authority by the Arms Export Control Act to, again, from stock, and again, your company might have items, if you do manufacture items, already may have stock in the DoD, or they may go out and procure from you articles, services, and training. So even if you're a services and training company. And either country cash or U.S. provided credit. This is where I was talking about most purchases, and I'll show you the numbers here in a couple minutes of how much has been purchased per year. But most of it is foreign person's money, but also foreign military finance program. One of the lists I showed you in the middle there in the blue is grant aid money. So that's why they say U.S. government provided credit. Think of that, just that credit or grant aid money, where the U.S. Treasury does help some countries that can't afford to buy items. But the United States government, specifically Congress, says, and the executive branch said, we need to help them, or we're going to be the police force of the world. So we will do some grant aid money to help them buy the items, but it's still acquiring from you all, so you need to know that. Next slide, please. The authorities then cover this enough. There's the Arms Export Control Act, sales from stock, procurement, and credit, just to let you know, reference for specifically subparts of the Arms Export Control Act that give this authority to the president, then again, that is delegated to State Department. Next slide. This is the juicy one. I sent these and I didn't get a chance to update it to 2020, to 2020, but I have that information. You can see when I started at DISAM back in 2001, for about the first 4 or 5 years, it was a steady eddy 10 to 13 billion dollars worth of sales. Not bad, but then you can see how it has gone up throughout the years. I have to say the spike of almost $70 billion in 1 year back in 12, there was a huge buy of grant aid money. There was a huge extra pot of grant aid money for Afghanistan during the war, heat of the war back in 2012. That upped it by quite a few billions of dollars, but also the Saudi Arabians bought $30 billion in 1 year. It was so big that the letters of offer and acceptance that usually is for a case, they had to do 4 cases because the computer couldn't take the high numbers. So that's why the spike. But now you see in 2018, FY 2018, 55.7 billion. If you look at 2019 statistics down there below, again, the 22, Title 22, that's the other people's money, as I would say, and the Title 10 is some of that other money. I'm talking FMF and that kind of thing. That's still $3.5 billion, and that's nothing to sneeze at. And instead of 55.7, then in 2019 it was 55.39, and then in 2021 it was like 55.1. So it's been 3 years in a row of $55 billion worth of sales a year, and also these contracts go on for many years. So if you want to take one shot, stop one day in time and say how much is actually under contract for foreign military sales, roughly somewhere between $500 and $550 billion worth at any one time. So you are talking about a huge market here. Next slide. Direct commercial sales, commercial export sales authorized still by the Arms Export Control Act, from the previous slide. Generally country cash, not so much on the FMF. There's 1 or 2 countries on exception on that, but it's really the exception. direct commercial sales, that's country. It's not appropriated funds. That's one big difference there. Next slide. And we'll have a couple more on direct commercial sales, starting with this one. Foreign purchasing options. Some people, we even have a client right now that asked my company to come up with a tutorial because they were going to other countries, and countries said, well, we bought items for military sales, so now we're not allowed to do direct commercial sales. So it might be confusing to all of you and your companies right here. Other countries are confused as well. So I want you to understand that the DoD is generally neutral. The U.S. government is generally neutral to whether things go FMS or DCS, because we want the foreign government to buy what the U.S. government is willing to sell. The DoD wants, and the State Department want the U.S. government to sell, and you guys to manufacture to sell, or the training you might have. So if the country wants direct commercial sales, we're going to let them go direct commercial sales. FMS, we're going to do it. They're generally neutral. The generally neutral is actually not a negative so much. Let me show you on the next slide why it isn't 100%. Next slide, please. That is, there's some FMS-only design items. We're talking high-tech items in here. Where for political military relations, we're not sure if that country should go direct commercial sales, because for FMS, things are more in control of the actual company selling, U.S. government selling it to the other country. Complex new items, but high sensitive technology. But this is not even probably 1% of all the FMS sales. But that's why it's primarily FMS or DCS. But there are a few caveats on here. Next slide. And you can see in the SAM references where you want to go. And here they are again. Some of the SAM references of that. Other thing is it can be hybrid. Something can be sold foreign military sales and keep the FMS, and then follow-on support for the item could be direct commercial sales. Or you could sell some that has to be FMS only, so let's say a missile or something, and then but the spare parts or whatever could be sold direct commercial sales. And there's one of those memos I've been telling you about to look for in the SAM. There's the memo there, 0932, which you can go in that reference and bring down and give you more information on this. But I just want to clear up, FMS and DCS, the U.S. government's good for either way, and there's hybrids. They're not, they work together. Don't make them opposite enemies or anything. That's not the way anybody sees it in the government. Next slide. All right, this is about combatant command security cooperation. I got O for organization and offices and officers. Let's go to this and talk about this for a couple minutes. Next slide. Great chart here. I want you to see again that in the State Department, everybody's eyes are drawn to the color, and that's the color is how the State Department divides the world. But don't miss out on the red lines. That is the combatant command. So the title up there of geographical combatant commands, follow the red lines, not the color, when you are talking about who in the command and the DoD is in command of the other parts of the U.S., of the world. And you can see they don't always correspond with the State Department's colors as well. So there's combatant commands. Next slide. In the combatant commands, I'm telling you that really, if you want to get into this business, don't just think about going to the foreign partner and trying to sell them. You need to find out whatever region that you are going to sell, and it might be multiple regions where you possibly want to get into FMS and DCS, and you need to make a call and make a visit appointment, and that's another whole lesson on all that. But call these different commands and their security cooperation offices within them to make an appointment to say, hey, I'm going into, they have AOR, area of responsibility, call it their sandbox. And they would like to know that you as a company are coming into their sandbox. Number one, they're going to help you if they can. But number two, they like to know you're in there. And so I wanted to let you see that these are the 6. 2 of them are in Stuttgart, Germany, Africa Command and European Command. The other 4 are all in the United States. So it's not like you have to go running around the entire world. And one of them's in the Pacific Command. Indo-Pacific is in Hawaii. So good luck getting people to want to go to that one. I'll go. Next slide. What is a SCO? It can be the organization, it can be the office, it can be the officer, and it's generally a person funded by DSCA. And how does DSCA get their money? And I'll get a little bit more on this on Wednesday. But when they sell these $55 billion a year worth of items, there's a 3.2% surcharge or admin fee. It's like they don't like to say surcharge, admin fee on it to administer this within the DoD and within the U.S. government. Well, I'll take 3.2% of $55 billion each year. So they've got 1 point whatever billion dollars a year coming in to finance things in DSC, including their own facilities and people, but also security cooperation people, organizations that are in the embassies of these countries. And you as BD people need to go, when you think of the country you want to, you've got to find this SCO office and find these people. The acronyms on the bottom are just the different names for SCOs: Office of Military Cooperation, Office of Defense Cooperation, on the way down. But generically, they're called SCOs. And next slide, I want to show you why you need to get to know these people. Next slide. Oh yeah, the SCOs, and that they are in the country team. They're under the ambassador. They're not army. They're DoD, military, and officers and enlisted personnel. But they fall under the ambassador, so they got a foot in both camps. They're like, their immediate boss is from the State Department, but their reports and their advancement, and they're still in the military, so they have like a foot in both camps. You can see, including commerce in there, of other on the team, but this is where the SCO, they're part of the embassy, they're part of the embassy team, but they're being financed by this 3.2% admin thing, and the money actually goes through DSCA to the different embassies to house them, feed them, and all that kind of thing. Next slide. Wow, the ABCs of this. You need to go and find these people, and everyone's different. So you can send me questions. How do I do this? You just literally are going to have to try and go to the embassies. I'll tell you right now, because everyone's different. There's like 120, 30, 40 of these different ones, and where to find them in the embassies. And some are small. Some countries don't have the SCOs at all. Some have huge ones, and it's just so complicated. You got to go and do your research for that country and the embassy there, and call them and say, I would like to talk to the Security Cooperation Office, and they'll understand what you're coming from. And what you need to go and visit these people for is because they can give you better access to the people that might make decisions on buying military items for the U.S. DoD. And they can build your relationship with the partner nation. They're in there for usually 2, 3, or sometimes even 4 years. Their job is to go native a little bit, and that they are going to understand the partner nation's way of acquiring the items. So they could give you some great knowledge, because every country is different. Again, Brian, my business partner Brian, and I can tell you this, but we do not have the bottom of the pyramid experience, because every country is different. But we're trying to tell you why you need to go to them and let them, these Americans that are in the SCO and the embassy, that are helping you understand the partner nation better and what they might want, and the capability with the partner nation. This is key, in that I want you to understand you can be the best business development person, BD person you ever was. And if you think you're going to go and selling it to the country, you're missing something. It's not just you and the country. The U.S. government's involved here. You got to get a license, or it's got to go through FMS. And if the U.S. government, and it's not for their better national security, they're not going to sell it to that country. And you can go and get everybody in that country. We got a fake country called North Giroux that we deal with. So you can go to North Giroux, and they're all happy with you and they want to buy. But if the State Department says no to buying, then you're out of luck. So you've got to get on the other side here with the SCO and get a feeling. They're not going to tell you, oh, absolutely, they buy your item, but they'll give you a feeling of whether they've got a good chance of a sale or not. So be aware of that. Next slide. Industry engagement. Here's showing you all the engagement. What have you done for research on them? What's your broad estimates of what you want to do? Working with the desk officers, they can help you when you've got a trade show. Who might be there and that kind of thing. So this is just some of the engagements. Next slide. We'll have a couple more slides on this. Show you more. So this is the security office. They have relationships with the combatant commands, with the host nation, the different DSCA and the implementing agencies and the military departments, new industry, country team, meaning the rest of the people in the embassy, and the ambassador. So they are in a unique position to know so many things. If you come in and ask for their help. Next slide. They will give you help in this kind of way. Generally is all we can say here, because every SCO is different in what they're willing to release and can release. But they're going to, oh, here's something you might need to know. Here's someone else you might want to call in the embassy. Here's some key business makers in this country. Here's appointments we might be able to maybe not make for you, but at least say this is where you might want to, they might make a call on your behalf. This is what we're talking about. Next slide. And also on doing business overseas, the Deputy Secretary of Defense actually said a memo on this about 3 years ago, again, on how to do this. And that memo, and again, you get these slides, so you could find this memo if you want, but then what you see in the bottom of the slide here, let's go to the next slide, and it blows it up. It's just the same information. This is overseas. This changes the SAM, the Security Assistance Management Manual got updated to say, the SCO, well, you know, as part of the Commerce, the Attaché Department, they're part of the U.S. mission, should be willing and to inform you, should be held about the budget. Inform. This is now the business overseas with this new iteration of conventional arms transfer. Of this was made a lot more clear to the SCOs that they need to help industry. So if you've been frustrated a few years ago, the world has changed over the last 3 years because of this document, and it's in the policy, and the SCOs have got to follow the policy of the SAM, which is the DSCA policy. Next slide. Sweet spot here, I'm trying to show you that, do you see on the right there, when it comes to the sweet spot of the common interest and objective of acquiring stuff, FMS or DCS, you don't see industry on there. You see the Department of State, Department of Defense, US, and the allied countries. Together, by country plans and strategies, the US DoD and State Department are strategizing what capabilities do we, and when I say we, the US government, we want this country to have. And then what does the country want to have? That's going to be the sweet spot. You're not in the sweet spot. I'm trying to train you or teach you a bit as I can here of how to understand that that's a sweet spot. And if you go and work with the SCOs and work with your allies and partners, you'll find that sweet spot much better and save yourself time and energy when there is no sweet spot for you. And time is money. Next slide. All right, the last thing in the couple of minutes I've got here, and I'll hopefully have a few minutes for a couple of questions if anybody has anything. Now, the whole thing is this was left of letter of request. We haven't even talked about the fact that there is the letter of request. So let me just keep on this heading slide because I want to tell you something and keep this in mind for the last 5 minutes I'm talking here. You, as a company, are allowed to help the foreign nation or partner nation develop the LOR that they will then submit to the U.S. government. They have to submit it with an authorized person of their country, the North Georgians, whomever, Minister of Defense, whoever, has to sign the letter of request, somebody in authority in that country, and sends it back to the U.S. I'll cover this in 2 days from now. Sends it back to the United States, to the DSCA and the implementing agency, and off you go. But let's get back to the key thing of everything I've told you now. You are not breaking any rules, not doing anything unethical. You are allowed. This is BD 101, man. This is getting in there and understanding that you can work with these countries, and if you've got a great relationship with the people in the country and they want to buy and they're interested in your item, you can help them write an actionable letter of request, meaning the more information that goes in there, it's easier for the DoD when they get it to specifically know what the country wants, so they're happy for you to help. Let's show you how to help. Next couple minutes, let's go to the next slide. Capability-based analysis. This is the DoD thing here saying, assess the capability. What are the gaps for this country in this area? What are the threats they're under? Describe their mission in relation to what the U.S. wants, and define and the requirements, the threat, the mission, the capability needs, and then you, companies, provide the capability need in the form of training or material solutions. But this is how the government is thinking right here. Capabilities, needs, and if you're working with the SCOs and everything else, maybe your needs fall in here, and now you know you've really got a shot, and then you can maybe help them write the LOR to fulfill these needs. Next slide. So this is what we're going to, this is kind of one of the last slides to show you what we're going to be talking about on Wednesday. You've got the young lady in the pictures just representing someone from the other country, like, oh, our national security, our mission, our budget, our threats. How are we going to fulfill all this? We need a material or training need. How many items do we need? What's the cost? They can go on to non-U.S. sources. You are not the only companies in the world out there, you know. But if you're going to go to U.S., as I said before, the Arms Export Control Act has the authority, and ITAR is the regulations that puts that authority into effect. You can go U.S. commercial exports, read that as direct commercial sales, or FMS. And again, the country, the U.S. doesn't care, is for the most part, whether you go DCS or FMS. But if you go FMS, the country needs then to submit a letter of request. So now we're just about from left of LOR to LOR. Next slide. The next couple, 2 or 3 slides. Starting with this one, there's a couple different slides here. There's a lot of information on the next 3 slides. I didn't leave them in here. I know you shouldn't put too much information on the slide. This is for you to hopefully, if you want it, these are tools for you to think about if you've made the great leap to helping a country or countries develop the letter of offer and acceptance. You want them to have the total package approach, not just the major item, the spare parts, the training, the facilities, all these things. I'm not going to go through all this on this in 2 more slides. These are tools that we found. I think one was from industry, one was from the government, and one our company made up. I just want you to have these as a starting block if you're a company that doesn't have this. Next slide. Another one to talk about total. This is our slide that we came up with: threat, mission, authorities, and all the what, you know, who, what, when, where, hows. These are the things to look at on the left side, the W's, and then there's also on transportation of the items and what it's going to cost. This is just another chart to get in your mind when you're doing an actionable LOR, as it says in the top right, something to look at. Next slide. This has really got a lot on it, but it's the total package approach, and then the total package approach is trying to show you other considerations on here. So these 3 slides is to help you again maybe build up your own entity of how you want to approach the total package approach and helping these foreign governments. If you want to, you don't have to, but I'm saying this is a way to maybe influence what they want to buy specifically, and maybe they'll just buy it from your company instead of another. But you can do that. I think the next slide is it for questions. I know I only got a little under 10 minutes left. I was trying to get done at 1:50. I made it by within a minute. Sorry about the fire hose, people, but there was a lot of, I think, good information in there. I am willing to stay on for another few minutes if there have been any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John, for that great informative presentation. That was a lot of information. As we turn into the Q&A portion of this webinar, as a kind reminder, if you have any questions for John today, please submit them via the Q&A box on your WebEx. While we compile the questions, John, I have one.
Sure.
How is the implementing agency chosen for a specific FMS case?
Oh, that's a great question. And again, unfortunately, I didn't have too much time other than to say that when the letter of request comes in, this is actually good because that's about where we are on this whole system. The letter of request could be, I want trucks. I want Army trucks on a napkin signed by a person of authority. I mean, that's kind of corny, but the point is it can be very unactionable. But if it is signed by a foreign government entity, that is a letter of request. What the U.S. government and DSCA and everything again want is much more actionable. And when they do this, the LOR actually should be sent, and sometimes the countries don't quite understand this. Sometimes the country will give a letter of request to a SCO. That's nice. The SCO should have a copy of it in their country, the Security Cooperation Office and officers in their country, but it should go to DSCA, Defense Security Cooperation Agency, or could from the countries that have been maybe working with one of the implementing agency right to the implementing agency. As I said, there's 11 of the implementing agency, but the 3 that really understand are Army, Navy, and Air Force. So how do each of these get this? And sometimes it goes directly to the Army, Navy, and the Air Force because the country already has a relationship with it, or it's just a no-brainer that, let's say, they want some submarine technology. Well, guess what? That's going to go to the Navy, and they know that. So the country may send it directly to the Navy. But if it goes to DSCA, Defense Security Cooperation Agency will then it's a very big organization, agency. And in there, they have different people that understand within the subset of the implementing agencies, Army, Navy, Air Force, who might be responsible for acquiring from industry the equipment they want. Let's say something like drones. Well, some drones might be small drones, that might be Army. Larger drones might be the Air Force. Another kind of drone that goes off a ship might be, of course, Navy. DSCA knows this. And when when the partner nation sends this to DSCA, they have people and staff that go, okay, this drone for this is Army. It's a small Army drone. Then I will send it to the Army as the implementing agency. Then the Army will then disseminate it down to the acquiring of major end items systems offices in the Army field, and they in turn will then contact the partner nation and start the process with the actionable LOR, excuse me, and we'll also make contact to start developing the letter of offer and acceptance, which is the document we'll talk about on Wednesday.
Thank you, John. We have another question. What is the breakdown of sales percentage comparison for FMS versus DCS?
That is a tough one. I had the slide up there and I didn't take it down because it's a little, State Department is not that forthcoming, and I'm not trying to poke them in the eye on the information. DSCA puts out every year, a couple months after the end of the fiscal year, usually late in the year, about late October, November, December, they put out those numbers I showed you on the scale for the last 20 years. State Department, they put out a financial number as well, and it's usually triple that. It's usually about 140, 150 billion dollars. But you got to understand that when things are sold FMS on an LOA, just about, if it's sold under an LOA and that number like 55 billion, maybe it's been a little bit of fluff's been put in the number when an LOA is written, because it's easier to say to a country, it's going to cost $6.3 million for this, when it might be more like 6.1. It's either to let them commit to a higher number, so it might be inflated a little bit, but that 55 is pretty close to the real number. So getting back to your question on the direct commercial sales, the direct commercial sales, that whatever you can get out sometimes, and it's hard to find sometimes, from State Department for direct commercial sales, they will say, we have approved licenses for $6.3 million. And maybe a third of the licenses are actually, of the license value is actually used. So it's just a number. It's like, how many deaths are there in India right now from the COVID? Well, it's way higher. You know, same thing. I'm sorry, this was in my mind. That's kind of a very poor comparison. I'm sorry, but I'm just saying, numbers sometimes aren't that factual. So yes, these are the numbers of licensed amount of money that the State Department licensed amount of sales there are, but actual sales can really differ from that. So just don't take that number too hard. But if you keep about triple the amount, that's what the licenses come in every year, more like the 140 billion, 130 to 150 billion. But I know, other than State Department, and I don't think they're talking, we do not know as our company or anybody. I didn't know that when I worked for the Department of Defense as a professor. I never got that information. So that's the best comparison I can do for that.
Thanks, John. We have another question. Can the request be for U.S. material that will be combined with, say, European material and then delivered as a solution to target nation? Or is this for U.S. material only?
All right. Always a caveat. As I said, if there's a model for security cooperation, it depends. So I will say it this way. The FMS sale items, this gives me a good answer to a thing on Commerce Department as well. The Arms Export Control Act says that and I'm paraphrasing, of course, here, that the items on a letter of offer and acceptance, and that's going to be, and that's also called a case. I'll be using the word case 2 days from now a lot. LOA case. the case, if anything gets on that case, on the lines on the case, it instantly becomes under the authority of State Department. It loses its foreign government, the fact that it was manufactured. And there's very rarely, but there are some times when some other countries' items will go into the case, or it might be more likely more sub things, some spare parts and that kind of thing. But once they go into the LOA, they're considered State Department controlled items. And I want to expand on that a little bit. So the LOA 2 also, if there's items under that Commerce Control List that we talked about, the EAR, the regulation, and the Commerce Control List, yes, if they're going to be sold, you get a license from Commerce Department to sell some kind of, let's say, computers overseas. You're a computer company, but then these computers are going to be sold as part of a subpart of the package for an LOA. Those items that were on the Commerce Control List, once they are embedded into the letter of offer and acceptance, they are then considered under the authority of State Department, because you can only have one cook in the kitchen. You can't have State Department working on the LOA and Commerce Department. So everything that, and it's very rare, but sometimes small parts can be on can be part of an LOA from other countries, and many times Commerce Department things can be part of the LOA. But once they're in that LOA, it's not the Commerce, it's the State Department that makes the final decision that this is the stuff that's going to be sold to North Draw or whatever, and it's under their authority.
Thank you, John. We're going to have one final question, which is how much of FMS deals are signed with U.S. small businesses?
You had to leave the one. I don't know that. I don't know how much of a small. I don't have that idea. A lot are, but let me use it because, of course, these are small businesses. I don't have a number, but I will tell you, and I'll show you this more next week. Oh, let me take it this way. I don't know that number, but I will tell you that there's a growing more and more of small businesses. There's a push for small businesses to sell more. And there are smaller businesses, not only as subs to primes, but small businesses. If I were a small business, I would be more looking possibly that even if the country already has a sale by a large LOA, by a prime, one of the bigs, and there might be like little fish to nibble around the edges there, you could go over there, and when they have follow on letters of acceptance to the huge first buy that usually has spare parts for up to a year or two, but then they go on any farther, they're going to want new LOAs that are much smaller and more defined for certain things, the spare parts. That would be a way, if I was a small business, I would be going after those follow-on support projects where carve off, come to us for that all those smaller parts for us, instead of us selling them to the prime and then the prime selling to you. We can do it faster, maybe do it cheaper. That would be the way I would approach it as a sub, excuse me, as a small. But how many, that data I don't believe is out there. So I do apologize for that at the end, but hopefully some of the other answers I gave helped the audience out there.
Okay, no, I appreciate it, John. We appreciate, and we look forward to our next webinar. And with that concludes today's presentation. Thank you all so very much for